Good afternoon, learners. Welcome you all to this Gandarshan session. Today we will be taking a topic on biogeochemical cycling. Especially this this is included under the course Plant Ecology and Taxonomy. So you will find one unit on biogeochemical cycling. Now we will go straight into the topic that what is meant by biogeochemical cycling. Now, cycle, it means there is an exchange or there is a movement or circulation of elements through organisms and the environment. That means there is an exchange of certain elements or there is an exchange of certain materials between the environment and the organisms. Organisms means it could be plants, it could be animals, it could be microbes. So you can see that there are two parts. One is bio, which means biological organisms like bacteria, plants, animals, and geochemical, which means geological and chemical processes such as formation of molecules. So these two are the components which we need to discuss in when we are discussing biogeochemical cycle. Elements within biogeochemical cycle flow in various forms from the non-living components of the biosphere to the living components. So you all know that in ecosystem there are two components, that is the biotic component and the abiotic component. So essentially here there is an exchange of material between the abiotic component, that is mostly the environmental component, that is atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere. So these are all the different abiotic components. And the biotic components means mostly the organisms, the producers, the consumers. So there is an exchange of material between these two components of the ecosystem. In order to survive, all the chemical elements need to be recycled continuously. So this recycling, that means from nature to organisms and then from organisms back to the nature. So philosophically, if you think that we as a living organism or any living organism, even the animals, they are taking up molecule by molecule, atom by atom, different components of the nature. But again, when with the death of the organism, that is when we die, then what will happen? We have to return back each and every atom and each and every molecule back to the nature. Because we cannot take anything with us. We have to return it back. Whatever we are procuring from the nature, that has to be returned back to the nature, and then only that's the end of life, that is the death. So that is actually, if you take it philosophically also, so that is also the connotation, and scientifically we call it a biogeochemical cycle. So this term was given by the Russian geographer named B. Polinov in 1937. So when we discuss this biogeochemical cycle, there are actually two types of, broadly you can divide it into two or three types. One is the gaseous cycle, one is sedimentary cycle, and another one you can also designate as the nutrient cycle. What is gaseous cycle? Gaseous phase is dominant. As the name suggests, that is you have the carbon dioxide, you have the nitrogen. Okay, so these are the gaseous phase, and these gaseous cycles tend to move more rapidly than do the sedimentary ones. And they adjust to changes in the biosphere because of the large atmospheric reservoir. So obviously these gaseous components, they are present in the atmosphere, like carbon, okay, which is present in the form of carbon dioxide, or the nitrogen, which is also there in the nature. Although the humans, we cannot fix nitrogen, only the green plants, they can fix the atmospheric nitrogen, which I will come later. That is under the nitrogen cycle. So first is the gaseous, second is the sedimentary cycle. That is the circulation of various elements such as carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur occurs. But these components can also be found in the lithosphere. That is not only hydrosphere, they can be present in the form of various salts. Of rocks, you get all these bound forms in soluble forms. So the main pool of element is the rocks, the soil and the minerals, and thereafter there can be weathering of the rocks, because of which we can, or the plants can make use of these released minerals or released components. Now, the sedimentary cycles get disrupted by local disturbances since the material remains immobilized in the Earth's crust. So, normally they are immobilized, but because of the weathering process, because of erosion or weathering, they are released. And then only they can be utilized, because then they are in the usable forms. Then we have the nutrient cycle. This cycle consists of two parts, the environmental phase and the organism phase. In the environmental phase, the cycling of the nutrients by different components of the environment, such as air, water and soil, occurs. And ultimately what happens is these components, they enter into the organism. So there it is called the organism phase. So whenever we are talking of nutrient cycle, again we find that there are two components, that is environmental component and the organism component. Now with this background knowledge, we will today focus on three main different type of cycles which you have in your course also, which you have in your units, that is carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle and phosphorus cycle. So we will focus today on these three main cycles. Now we start with the carbon cycle. Now very simple, that carbon, you all know that carbon is present in the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. You all know that. Also in the animal body or human body or in the plant body also, the carbon is present in organic forms, because you all know that in photosynthesis what happens, the carbon dioxide is actually incorporated, and ultimately through the different phases of photosynthesis you have the light reaction, and you have the photochemical reaction or light reaction, and then you have the dark reaction or the Calvin cycle. And ultimately what is produced, you all know that the glucose that is being produced. So basically the atmospheric carbon is incorporated into an organic form, that is glucose. Okay, so carbon, it can be present in two forms. It can be present in gaseous forms in the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide, or it can be present as organic form in the living organisms, whether plant or even in animal. You know that organic chemistry is actually, it is made up of all the compounds which are composed of carbon, and which are all components of the organic systems, living systems. So it is 49% of the weight of the organisms, and the atmosphere consists of around 0.032% of carbon. But the point is that the carbon concentration is increasing. You all know that the carbon dioxide concentration is increasing day by day. But under natural condition, if you consider the normal concentration of carbon or carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that should be around 0.032%. Although because of our human activities, it is increasing. Now, carbon is fixed through photosynthesis. We all know that, and I have already discussed that. Also, in the aquatic system or aquatic environment, you have a large amount of carbon dioxide. 50% more carbon dioxide. You can find it in ocean as compared to the atmosphere. And there you have the dissolved carbon. That is carbon dioxide dissolved in the form of carbonates, bicarbonates, etc. that you have in the aquatic system. And there are many plants where these kind of carbon in the form of bicarbonate and carbonates, they diffuse into the plant system. It can happen. Now, major source is the dead organic matter and fossil deposits. So the four main reservoirs of carbon: atmosphere, terrestrial biosphere, oceans and sediments. And also because of the fossil fuels like coal, petroleum, peat, limestone, these are also the major reservoirs of the carbon, which is present in the lithosphere, in the soil or in the rock surface, etc. So weathering of rock, burning of fossil fuel, volcanic activity, what they do basically, they return the carbon back to the atmosphere. So you can see from the soil or from the rocks to the atmosphere, these are recycled. Okay, and then plants are there. Plants are actually taking up that carbon. They are producing the glucose. Then the consumers, the primary consumer or the secondary consumers, they feed on the plants. Okay, and so the carbon goes into their system. And then again, after the death and decomposition, what happens? That carbon returns back to the nature. So you can see that there is a very clear kind of recycling. Okay, from the exchange, from the atmosphere, from the lithosphere to the plants, to the consumers, producers and the consumers. So the exchange of carbon between reservoirs occurs because of various chemical, physical, geological and biological processes. The carbon pool involved in global carbon cycle is around 55,000 gigatons, and the oceans contain around 38,000 gigaton of active carbon pool as bicarbonate and carbonate ions. I already told you that in the aquatic environment you have the carbon in the soluble form, that is bicarbonate and carbonates. 4 to 9 into 10 to the power 13 kg of carbon dioxide is fixed through photosynthetic activity of plants each year. Because in photosynthesis the carbon dioxide is utilized, atmospheric carbon dioxide is utilized, okay, and it is incorporated. But again, due to respiration, what happens? We release the carbon dioxide. So you can again see that there is an exchange of carbon in the form of carbon dioxide between the atmosphere and the organism, and again return back to the atmosphere. So there is a clear recycling. In aquatic environment, dissolved carbon dioxide is utilized by the phytoplanktons. Carbon present as bicarbonate and carbonate gets converted into carbon dioxide that is used by the phytoplanktons. Carbon dioxide released during respiration is also reutilized by the phytoplankton to produce more biomass. So atmospheric carbon dioxide, as I told you, it gets easily dissolved in water or the aquatic phase through precipitation. The dissolved carbon forms carbonic acid, which dissociates to form hydrogen and bicarbonate ions. The bicarbonate ions further dissociate to form hydrogen and carbonate ions. So that is how you get this carbonate and the bicarbonates, okay, due to the dissolution of the carbon dioxide, okay, in the aquatic environment. Now, in addition, there are some other sources of carbon also in the atmosphere, like carbon monoxide, methane, calcium carbonate. Okay, so these are also, they are not the major source, but nowadays, in the present times, these are becoming, major sources because of our human activities. You know that there is global warming. There is an increase in the carbon dioxide concentration. Even methane emissions, they have become very predominant, or they have become very much of recent concern. So these in turn, they can enhance the concentration of carbon in the atmosphere. And the difference between the carbon uptake and released, that difference, it gives a measure of the net primary productivity. The rate of primary productivity determines the rate at which carbon cycles through the ecosystem. So if the productivity is high, then you have to understand that the carbon cycle is also very fast, like in tropical rainforests. Okay, there what you find is there you have a very high productivity. So which means that there is a very quick recycling of the carbon. So if you take a look at this figure, then you can easily see what we have discussed, that is photosynthesis, the sunlight, then there is the photosynthesis because of the incorporation of carbon dioxide, and then the plants, they are producing organic carbon in the form of glucose. Even the animal systems, okay, they are also respiring out the carbon dioxide, and after the death and decay of the plants, again it returns back to the nature, that carbon. Again, root respiration, also there is emissions from the factories and automobile and other kind of factories, and then there is again the release of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So you see how the carbon is being recycled from the nature to the organisms and back to the nature. Now, what is the impact, human impact on carbon cycle? I already told you that greenhouse effect, because the carbon dioxide concentration is increasing. There is methane emission. So all these, they are they are causing a major increase in the carbon dioxide concentration. And 8 billion tons of carbon dioxide is added to the atmosphere each year, and increase by 35% occurred in the last 130 years. And this increased carbon dioxide, it can trap heat. And because it can trap heat, there is a global warming, and also there is the melting of the glaciers. In the polar ice caps, the Arctic region and Antarctic region, there is melting of the glaciers. Okay, and so it can lead to extensive flood it can lead to the extensive rise in the sea level. So these kind of adverse effects can be there in the nature. Next, we move to the nitrogen cycle. So you see that 75% of the atmospheric nitrogen gas is there, and nitrogen is fixed through a process called nitrogen fixation, which the green plants can do. That is, the green plants, either the symbiotic or non-symbiotic nitrogen fixing bacteria are there. Like the symbiotic nitrogen fixing bacteria, that is the rhizobium, which is present in the roots of the leguminous plants, and the aerobic and anaerobic bacteria, the free living bacteria are also there, like Azotobacter, Clostridium, etc. In addition, there are the cyanobacteria, the blue-green algae. They can also fix the nitrogen, like Anabina, etc. Now, there are three basic kinds of nitrogen fixation process. One is called the ammonification, one is called nitrification, another is called denitrification. What is meant by ammonification? Ammonification means the actinomycetes and the fungi, they metabolize the organic nitrogen and release it in the form of an inorganic nitrogen, that is ammonia. So the atmospheric nitrogen is fixed in the form of ammonia, and this process is called ammonification, which is carried out by Bacillus, Clostridium, etc. What will happen next? In the next step, this ammonia will be converted to nitrate via nitrite. So first nitrite and then to nitrate. And this process is known as nitrification, which is caused by some bacteria called like Nitrosomonas, Nitrosococcus, etc. So you know that the nitrates, these are mostly different salts, potassium nitrate, sodium nitrate. You must have heard about the names of these nitrates, calcium nitrate, etc. So these are present in the soil also. And then these nitrates will, from these nitrates, again there will be, it will be converted to molecular nitrogen. Okay, so that process is known as denitrification. So the nitrates get leached in the soil and they are lost through denitrification process, where the molecular or gaseous nitrogen, nitrogen oxide, nitrous oxide, these are being formed from the nitrates. And this process is known as denitrification. So there are three main processes: ammonification, nitrification, denitrification. Denitrification is caused by some bacteria like Thiobacillus denitrificans, Micrococcus denitrificans, and so on. The total nitrogen fixed annually is around 92 into 10 to the power 6 metric tons, while the amount of nitrogen returned back via denitrification is around 83 into 10 to the power 6 metric tons. So this is actually the diagram you can see if you take a look. So there are again two components, that is atmosphere and lithosphere. Atmosphere, you see gaseous nitrogen, and in lithosphere you have again the different organic residues or organic matter, and from there it gets converted to the ammonium ions. Then ammonium ion, I told you, through nitrification, first nitrites and then the nitrates. Okay, the nitrates can also be taken up by the plants because the plants take up the nitrate salts. Okay, it is a very important inorganic nutrient for the plant. And again, nitrates may also get converted to gaseous nitrogen or oxides through denitrification. And also there are leaching also. That is, some loss is also always there. So this is in general the nitrogen cycle. And again, the human impact on nitrogen cycle, because of excess use of fertilizers, nitrogen containing fertilizers, there may be further addition of nitrogen. Okay, even we use the nitrogenous fertilizers, there can be excess concentration of nitrogen, more than what is estimated. So also it might lead to a process called eutrophication. Particularly in lakes, we find this eutrophication process. What is eutrophication? Presence of nitrogenous compounds in high amounts promotes growth of algae and phytoplankton, leading to nutrient depletion. So this process is known as eutrophication. Also, the nitrous oxide, it gets converted to nitrogen dioxide after oxidation, and then it combines with ozone. And therefore, this kind of effect, it leads to an ecological imbalance, and the nitrogen oxides get converted to nitric acid, which may come down again in the form of acid rain, which is a very well-known, ecological concern, that is acid rain. So all these happen due to excess amount of nitrogen in the atmosphere, which ultimately occurs due to reckless human activities or the anthropogenic activities. So this is all about the nitrogen cycle. And the last 5 minutes we will talk on the phosphorus cycle. That is, phosphorus, this is the most abundant form of phosphate, that is orthophosphate. So in soil, you know that again there are different phosphate salts. Phosphorus is present as an inorganic element, and it is a very important nutrient for the plant. NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, you all know that. We call NPK fertilizers. So phosphorus is a very important component. And in the organism, this phosphate or phosphorus is present in the form of ATP. You know that ATP is the energy currency, adenosine triphosphate. Even DNA, the deoxyribonucleic acid, it has phosphorus. It has the phosphodiester bond. That means there is phosphorus. So it is a very important component. That is even in certain RNA also, DNA, RNA, ATP, everywhere you find the phosphorus. So it is a very well-known organic component also in the human body or in any animal body or even the plant body. In the human body, 80% of phosphorus is found in teeth and bones. Phosphorus is derived from calcium phosphate and membrane phospholipids. So major source is the rock surface, sediments, etc. Even in oceans, these are present in the form of phosphates. Sedimentary rocks, there also you have huge amount of phosphorus. And from all these sources, phosphorus is released due to weathering, leaching and mining. Geologic processes bring ocean sediments to land, while weathering adds terrestrial phosphate back to the ocean. Some of the phosphorus returns to freshwater and terrestrial ecosystem via death and decay of plants, grazers, predators. And such kind of phosphates, they settle down at the bottom of the ocean and lakes. And the movement of phosphorus, it is considered as one of the slowest biogeochemical cycle, because in case of soil or in ocean, the phosphorus movement is very slow, because atmosphere does not play a major significant role in the movement of phosphorus, unlike carbon or nitrogen. So here it is mostly the soil or the ocean, that is lithosphere or the hydrosphere. These are the main components. At the Earth's normal temperature, phosphorus does not act as a gaseous form, hence it gets circulated through lithosphere and hydrosphere, as I already mentioned. And you find a lot of minerals, you find a lot of soil organisms through erosion. Okay, so this is actually the diagram. If you see that rocks and soil, as I said, you don't find atmosphere. See, I have not mentioned atmosphere. Mostly the rocks and soil, runoff, inorganic phosphate, absorption by the plants, phosphate, then metabolism, ATP, and then death and decomposition of the organisms. Again, there is return back of the phosphorus to the rocks and soil surface. Finally, what is the human impact of this? The mining of phosphate. Again, see, we are using excess of fertilizers, chemical fertilizers. If you use so much of fertilizers which contain, phosphorus, superphosphate of lime, etc. You have heard these names. So all these, fertilizers, they are adding more and more phosphorus in the soil. And because of extensive agricultural practices, we have to use such fertilizers to increase the crop productivity. Okay, and so we are adding these kind of fertilizers, and there is a gradual buildup of phosphorus, more and more phosphorus in the soil. And that again can lead to eutrophication. Like we discussed in the nitrogen cycle, because of the high quantities of detergent, food processing wastes, okay, which all contain high quantities of phosphorus, they add phosphorus to water, and because of these phosphates, the water bodies become extremely rich in nutrients, and therefore different kind of algal growth, different kind of unwanted organisms they grow, and they cause this kind of, it's a kind of pollution. So this we call as the eutrophication. So learners, today what we discussed is we focused on what is meant by biogeochemical cycle, and then we discussed the different types of biogeochemical cycle, and then we focused on the three main kinds of biogeochemical cycle, that is carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus. So please go through your SLMs, and in case if you find any difficulty, please feel free to contact us, write to us, and we are always there to help you all. Thank you, and please go through the unit. Have a very, very happy learning. Thank you.
Do you wish to be part of a television studio like this, or any other media system, or already part of any media system, want to enhance a new set of skills? Welcome to School of Journalism and New Media Studies. Here in the School of Journalism and New Media Studies, we are offering program for all set of people to learn and enhance their media skills. The vision of School of Journalism and New Media Studies is to generate a new set of